Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to the sheep pen, bah, where no goats are allowed. So today I want to talk about the top news story in the world right now, which is the Hamas attack, the surprise attack on Israel, and the impending retribution and revenge that is ultimately coming to the people of Palestine because of this attack. Now, you can't be a watcher of end time studies and not keep your eye on the nation of Israel. Many of you know that I'm not big into the dispensationalism and the picture perfect cookie cutter, we got it all figured out ideology behind end time studies in the current world. However, you cannot look at this and ignore what's going on in Israel, especially in the face of the prediction of wars and rumors of wars being one of the primary indicators that you're in the end time. I could lay out all of the arguments for why we are potentially in the end times, but I'm going to focus today on the conflict in Israel and how it will affect you personally, and then I want to talk a little bit about what you can do on an individual level to prepare for what I believe is inevitably coming. So let me lay this out for you. Now, there's a little history here. This attack happened on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. In 1973, on the exact same day, in October, this is also known as the October War, a war broke out where Egypt invaded Israeli territory, and on the other end of the country, the Syrians also invaded. And that war was a traditional war of, a general 20th century tanks and airplanes fighting it out in mostly uninhabited desert. And I do not believe that since the early days of the Israeli nation, there's been this kind of violence visited upon the people of Israel. Israel, most of it feels very much like, I've been told this, suburbia. That this incursion by the Hamas militants in the Gaza Strip, this incursion from Gaza into Israel, is one of the few times in history, and probably the biggest incident in history, where everyday Israelis, people living their normal lives, faced true danger. Yes, there's been there were Scuds launched at Israel during the Iraq War, the first one. There was, there's been a lot of terrorist bombings, isolated attacks, but this was an organized attack. This was an attack that was multi-pronged. If you've been watching the news, they've covered it pretty well. They brought in heavy equipment to destroy the barrier, the border wall. Insurgents poured into Israel armed with AK-47s and other small weaponry. Infiltrators used these ultralight aircraft. They keep saying they're like hang gliders, but they're not really. They're go-karts with a fan motor, right? Mounted underneath a kite, essentially a wing made of fabric. So like a hang glider, but it has power and they can maneuver and they can go much further distances. They can launch from the ground, land, reset up, and launch for a return. And not only that, when they hit the ground, they have the capability of cutting the sail loose, the kite loose, and driving these things further in to their designated targets. So you had an air campaign, albeit primitive. You had drones being used to drop bombs on military vehicles. You had the insurgents pouring into essentially suburban neighborhoods and doing home invasions. More than 40 captives have been accounted for at this point. I think the number is going to be much higher, where the Hamas fighters took captive Israelis and took them back across the border into the Gaza Strip. And the response to this kind of, this is war hitting the average Israeli at home. And that's something that hasn't really occurred in the history of Israel. That most of the fighting was out in the desert, out in the remote areas, fighting over borders. But to have this kind of, you know, organized and concerted and synchronized attack on the Israeli people, on civilians, is not something that they're used to, not something that they were ready for. And the response has been grave and dire. So what do I think is about to occur? I do believe that this is another indicator that we are in the beginnings of what will be looked upon in the future as World War III. The war, the proxy war we're fighting in the Ukraine with Russia is putting us at an all-time low in relationship with the Russians. And now you've got this this war being kicked off in Israel. And Iran, we all know, is behind Hamas and Hezbollah. Now, they call Hamas and Hezbollah terrorist organizations. But I think a better naming for these groups would be a Palestinian militia. This is the equivalent of a Palestinian army in the form of these two terrorist organizations, Hezbollah operating mainly in the north, and the Gaza Strip being and the Gaza Strip and the West Bank being the territory of Hamas. Hezbollah and Hamas are both backed by and supported by Iran. And the Iranian connection is something that nobody is really actively speaking of right now. Everyone's talking about this like it's going to be this limited conflict just between Palestine. In Texas, we call them Palestine, not Palestine, because there's a Palestine, Texas, spelled the same. So forgive me if I mispronounce Palestine. But the Palestinians and the Israelis are in a conflict, and people think that's all there is to it. And I think that's a miscalculation. And many of you think this is not going to have any effect on your personal life. And I would say you are wrong about this. This is going to have a greater effect on your personal life than the Ukrainian war has. And we got to go back and look at the 50-year-old Yom Kippur War to see the effect that Israel can have on the international scene. That everybody knows about the Cuban Missile Crisis and how close we came to war with Russia over the Cuban Missile Crisis during the Kennedy administration. But few know that 10 years later, during the Yom Kippur War, we came close to nuclear war again. That the events of the Egyptian and Syrian invasion of territories of Israel and the response brought us very close to nuclear war. And here's why. At the time, in 1973, Israel was in possession of tactical nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons in Israel is seen as the weapon of last resort. If Israel feels like it's going to be overrun, it's its go-to. Its go-to is not to wait for to be rescued by foreign troops, but rather to defend themselves with the use of nuclear weapons. And in 1973, they signaled to the United States that they intended to use tactical nuclear weapons because the initial strike of Egypt and Syria against Israel made them believe they were about to be overrun by foreign troops and occupied. And I can promise you, Israel will use nuclear weapons before they allow themselves to be occupied. This was true in 1973, and it's truer than true now. It's ultimately very true now. And as much as they need assistance from the United States and other allied nations, they're not relying on it, and they're not at all going to bank on it. They're banking on their nuclear arsenal to ensure that they will never be occupied, because much of Israel is either the children of or the existing survivors of the Holocaust. That much of the population of Israel are European Jews who survived the Holocaust, or whose families survived the Holocaust to escape to Israel in 1948. And these survivors very much have a never again kind of attitude when it comes to being genocided or being attacked because of their religion or nationalities. And this is part of the collective consciousness of Israel. This is a part of the Israeli identity. Never again will they be treated this way. And that very much, this recent attack very much triggered their self-defense mechanisms. And part of part of Judaism is this extreme response to being attacked. It's why Moses had to instill the law of an eye and a tooth for a tooth. This didn't serve to legalize revenge as much as it served to limit revenge. That overreaction, over response, there is an attitude amongst Israelis. You kill one of ours, we're going to kill 1,000 of yours. And Moses' law was to try to limit that. And, you know, an eye for an eye, a limited response to being attacked, not an overwhelming, destructive response to being attacked. However, that's still part of the national identity, especially in the wake of what occurred internationally against Jews during World War II. So a combination of this historic and biblical response to aggression by, you know, engaging in a vengeful act, then you have also the never again kind of mentality that is pervasive in the society. And what I predict is what they're telling you. You know, when Israel threatens something, it's not like the United States or Russians when they, was it saber rattling? When they rattle their saber, there's really not any saber rattling with Israel. They don't warn you or even threaten you as much as they just tell you what's going to happen right up front. It's not a threat, and it's not even a warning. It's a promise. And so the initial response to this surprise attack from Hamas has been, we are going to destroy Hamas. Now, to destroy Hamas means to destroy the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And as far as I know, militants in the West Bank and militants in the north near the Golan Heights, the north being more Hezbollah, all being backed by Iran, right? So far, those other factions are staying out of it, and this is a war between Gaza, Hamas, and the nation of Israel. However, even already, the initial response by Israel is overwhelming. That there's a viral footage of what appears to be, I think, an apartment building. It might be a business center, but I'm guessing when I would say a 40-story building in Gaza City was hit with an aerial bomb right after this surprise attack by the Palestinians and by the Hamas. You know, in my opinion, Hamas and Palestinian is interchangeable because Hamas is in control of Palestine. The Palestinian officials are very much in the pocket of Hamas, and Hamas is really the militant wing of the Palestinian Authority. And so to say Hamas, you might as well say Palestinian, right? And I think the Palestinian people and Hamas are joined in their disdain for Israel and their desire for war. This very much destroys, you know, in one day, 30 years or more of diplomatic efforts by the United States and other nations to bring peace in the Middle East. And Israel is set to make their move. I'm going to make some political war predictions here. That this will not be any kind of measured response from Israel. Israel declared war, I believe, yesterday or today. Officially declared war. It's not an operation. It's not a defense move. It is war. When Israelis fight war, they fight for all the marbles. They aren't going to hold back. And if they feel threatened, they will use tactical nuclear weapons on the battlefield. Now, there's not any reason for them to use that against Hamas and the Palestinians because Israel has more than enough military might to simply destroy Hamas and the Palestinian people, drive the Palestinian people into a tiny portion of the land that they currently possess, occupy all of Palestine, and basically create a massive prison camp for Palestinians who don't bend the knee to Israel, who don't comply, and who hold on in any way to the disdain for Israel. And I see that as the totality of Palestinians. The totality of Palestinians are going to be in absolute rebellion to Israel, and they're going to also engage in total warfare and in total self-defense against the Israeli backlash. The Israeli backlash is going to be more than just a payback. Okay, it's not going to be an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I see already emerging in the Israeli government a complete rejection of the concept of peace and a two-nation solution. That Israel is going to quickly move into conquering Palestine, and they're going to thumb their nose at international pressure, and they're not going to bend their knee because their women and children have been attacked, because suburbia in Israel came under fire. And people are equating this to the 9/11 occurrences here in the United States, that this is on par for Israel, what we encountered during 9/11. And there was a genuine call for all-out warfare on 9/11, and one could say that we never did respond to the people who were behind 9/11, in my opinion. We use it as an excuse to continue the previous war in Iraq and open a new war in Afghanistan that we were destined to fail. Afghanistan's never been ever properly conquered. Their people and their terrain make it nearly impossible for a foreign power to occupy and control them. So instead of really dealing with the fact that the 19 people on board the aircraft for the 9/11 attack were Saudis. And so here we sit at the precipice of Saudi Arabia beginning to recognize Israel as a nation, normalize them, have a peace treaty, open up trade deals. All of this was on the precipice, on the verge of happening, when the Palestinians and Hamas leaders decided to make this surprise attack and basically start an international war in the Middle East. Every Arab nation, no matter how friendly, Egypt being one of the friendliest towards Israel at this point, even though they were the primary protagonist in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, that they're the most westernized of the Arab nations. And so on one hand, you have Egypt saying, careful, Israel, don't overreact. Don't overpay them back. Don't use this as an excuse to invade Palestine, occupy all its territory, and imprison its people. This is all said in diplomatic code, of course, but they're calling for a cessation of violence, and I do not believe that Israel has peace in their mouth right now. They have blood in their mouth right now, and Israel is going to overreact. Israel, their normal is overreacting for Americans. You know, the rest of the world sees what they see as overreacting. Israel sees as prudent response. Okay, and so you can expect a massive decimation. And I would say the one 40-story building in Gaza City that was destroyed from aircraft probably equaled the playing field. Would have, in my opinion, been enough right there, that the numbers coming in of Palestinian dead so far, and many of them civilians, is not being properly distributed yet because of the chaos, because of the lack of reporters on the ground in Gaza City and other places. That I'm sure it's already lopsided, that there have been way more Palestinians killed than Israelis killed. But that information is not currently available, so it's just speculation. But just looking at the response, it's already been overwhelming. And I think they're just getting started, hence their declaration of war. So how's this going to affect us? Well, in 1973, even though that war was across the world, it affected America greatly, because our support for Israel caused all of the Arab nations to engage in an oil embargo against the United States and other supporting nations. Even Europe was not in favor of the United States' support for Israel during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, and most European countries prohibited the United States from using their airfields in an effort to resupply the Israelis, who had expended much of their munitions in the first few days of that conflict. And the resulting oil embargo caused what in America we call the gas shortage of the 1970s. It triggered a massive recession in the United States. Gas prices went through the roof. Inflation took off. There's a lot of reasons why that is, but definitely the war in the Middle East and the oil embargo had a great deal to do with the inflation that we saw in the 1970s. And we're currently already involved in that kind of response because of our involvement in Ukraine. So this is kind of the 1-2 punch. We are obligated to back Israel. We are an ally of Israel. We will support them. We will resupply them. We will send them weapons. We will send them high technology. And that's going to trigger even more hatred for the United States in all Arabic countries, even those countries that are friendly to the United States. This may draw Iran in a not just a covert but an overt way. You might see an Iranian air raids against Israel, against his military targets in Israel. That would result in a responding attack against Iran. Some are saying that Israel is already planning overt airstrikes against Iran because Iran is backing Hezbollah and Hamas, and that the rockets being used against the Israeli people were purchased with American money, right, through Iran. And what happened is we just gave a large sum of money, millions, to Iran in exchange for them releasing some American prisoners that were being held there, some hostages. So we paid a ransom to Iran that was pretty much, that money was seen as gravy by the nation of Iran, and they just funneled it straight to Hamas, which powered and empowered and funded this war that's currently going on. So this is a proxy war in Palestine between Iran and the United States and Israel. And so this could open a wider war. If you think I'm crazy, then you're probably not aware of how much Iran is involved in the Ukrainian war. The Iranian weapons and drones are prevalent on the battlefield in Ukraine. That Russia's drone program is actually inferior to the Iranian drone program. And so Russians are being bolstered in the Ukraine war by Iranian armaments, specifically in the drone program. And one knows, if you watch the news, that drone strikes are a major part on both sides. That in so many ways, Ukraine is a drone war. The war the Palestinians brought was powered and fueled a lot by the drone program of Iran and them sharing these drone weapons with Hamas. And so Israel knows the role that Iran is playing in this conflict. And I think part of their retaliatory plan is not just to destroy Hamas within their own territory, but also to broaden this to a war with Iran that will definitely pull the United States in some form or capacity. All of this hostility and our steadfast defense of Israel is going to cause another oil embargo. Saudis have already sided with Russia over Ukraine, and they will undoubtedly side with Iran over Israel. And so we are going to see World War III break out. All right. Took me 23 minutes to explain the situation and show you how dire the situation is. This definitely plays into end time eschatology. And whether this is just another world war or whether this is the end times, I will tell you that you need to become prepared. You need to become mentally prepared for this and understand all of the different many factions involved in what's about to happen. You need to be financially prepared. You need to stop blowing your money. You need to stop blowing your money. Now, this is a guy that asks you for money, but when I say blowing money, I mean blowing money on toys. You need to stop blowing money on fun. It's time for you to get serious about your finances because a major recession is going to hit us that's made the current problems look like nothing. When you add a Saudi or international Arabic coalition embargo on oil to the United States, we already lost Venezuela. That means we're going to have to rely on our own reserves for oil. So expect gas prices to get very high. You need to be financially prepared for what's coming, right? But there's more than one way to financially prepare. Many of you, as though you should stop blowing money on fun and toys and start putting your money into preps. Start putting your money into metals if you have that kind of money. But I'm also going to offer you another option, is you need to prepare for what is coming by sowing the seeds of good fortune, I guess you could say it, sowing the seeds of blessings to other people. That not only can you build up your bank account by cutting your expenses, you can also build up your sowing and reaping capabilities by sowing good seeds into your community. That with what is coming, we are going to have to rely on one another. We're going to have to rely on God. So part of your preparation a big part of your preparation should be spiritual preparation in the form of sowing good seeds, giving to charities, giving to needy people, giving to this channel, supporting this voice that's talking about this sort of stuff. If you want to know how to become more spiritually empowered, then you should go back and find every video over the past year and a half that has less than 400 views, because the most effective spiritual methods and teachings on this channel get the lowest views. People want to hear me talk about Bigfoot. People want to hear me talk about this kind of stuff and political things. But when it comes to the hands-on basics of how to become stronger spiritually, only about 300 or 350 of you are faithful in watching those videos. So if you're not one of those people who watches all those videos, you should go back right now and review them, because spiritual fitness is going to be the most important thing coming into the future. Because here's the thing. You can put up money in the bank and the government can just seize it under wartime in a wartime situation. They can seize your preps. You can have all this food and the government can come in and go, you have too much food, you're a hoarder, pass it out, we're going to send it to Israel or to the Ukraine in World War III. And this is something that we know occurred during World War II. You don't need 2 cows, one's good enough. And this kind of stuff happened, rationing, that sort of thing. All of that is going to deplete your preparations, your physical preparations, okay? But one thing they can't take from you is your spiritual preparations. They can't take from you your mental preparations. So I would start with, if you're looking to prep, if you're looking to be prepared for this, I would not put a bunch of focus on the financial. Of course, stop blowing money, stop living like it's 1985, and realize where you're at in the world, that you're facing a time of great trials and tribulations coming, whether it's the Great Tribulation or just normal tribulation. You're facing some things, and you need to get real about that. And not only should you get real about it in the physical realm, you've got to get real about it in the spiritual realm. You need to pray more. You need to fast more. You need to work your faith to a higher level. It is faith that will see you through this, not money, not politics, not even your physical strength. The physical strength can be taken away with one bug, with one injury, with one physical issue can steal from you and rob from you your physical strength. The government, hoodlums, the economy. If you think if the economy crashes and you got a house full of preps, are your preps going to be what you're leaning on when war really breaks out, when things get really bad? No, you're going to have used those already, because the financial situation in America has gotten so bad. But what they can't take away from you is knowledge. If you don't know how to start a fire, you better learn. If you don't know how to purify water, you better learn. If you don't know how to deal with sanitation without the help of the city, state, government, you better learn. You better learn how to pray, because ultimately that's all you have. Like they say, there are no atheists in foxholes, and this whole world's about to be a foxhole if you ask me. You better get spiritually strong. You better enhance your faith. You better be able to cast out devils, because the devil's behind all of this, and you're going to see another increasing rash of demonic possession and mental illness in this country and around the world. And if you're not prepared to do battle with the devil, you're going to find yourself on the wrong end when things start to go really bad in this country. You better get spiritually strong. You better be able to pray in blessings from heaven. You better have your spiritual preparations in place. You better have paid it forward already and have a karmic debt owed to you. right? I hate to use that phrase, but it sounds better than sowing and reaping. You better sow the seeds now, because you're going to have to reap them later. You're going to have to sow the seeds of goodness because you're going to need goodness. You're going to have to sow the seeds of generosity because you're going to need generosity. You're going to have to sow the seeds of love because you're going to need love in this future that we're facing. I honestly feel like I didn't pay a lot of attention to or talk about the Ukrainian war much on this channel, but this war in Israel is a flashpoint. It's going to combine with what's going on in Ukraine to create what will be known as World War III. This war may or may not touch our shores in a physical way, but it's going to destroy our finances. It's going to destroy our way of life. It's going to cause us to have to rely on each other. It's going to cause us to all have to rely on community resources. You better pay it forward now. You better support this channel. You better support your local charities. You better make contributions to your food bank, and you better stop buying the latest toy and gadget. You better stop blowing your money on needless vacations. It's time to buckle down and get real about what this nation is facing. You are facing something you are not prepared for, and I don't mean to scare you, but I do mean to spurn you into activity. You better pay it forward. You better get on your knees. You better learn to pray. You better learn to fast. You better make friends with your neighbors. You better get involved in your community, because ultimately that's all you're going to have. The moth and the rust will eat your preps. The moth and the rust will steal your finances. This war and this recession is going to cause us all to go down another notch financially, and you better support each other. You better support people like me, because it's going to come back to you in this law of sowing and reaping. This is not the time to be selfish. This is not the time to be self-centered. This is not the time to be hedonistic. This is the time to fast and pray. This is the time to seek God. This is the time to love your neighbor. Love is all we have. Love and faith and hope are very important, and faith is the power of spirit, is behind spiritual power, but love is the fuel of good fortune and blessings. You better pay it forward. You better get involved in your community. You better heal your family. You better work on yourself. You better get your anger under control. You better work on your battle with depression. You better work on your outlook on life, and the best way to do that is through spiritual means. I'm going to start talking more and more about how to become spiritually strong. You know, many of you are aware of a man named Bill Cooper, credited for predicting 9/11 before it happened. He's been gone many years, but I heard him say something. He says, no matter how big and strong you are, no matter how bad to the bone your favorite gun is, no matter how deep your preps go, that you're going to be your own worst enemy unless you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Unless you have spiritual fitness, you are going to fail. And in the time that you need to be your strongest, you're going to turn that gun on yourself when you're cornered. That the battle is in your own mind. The battle is for your own spirit. So you better become spiritually minded. You better work on your spiritual fitness. You better be ready to meet Jesus, because it could happen at any time. This nation of Israel will not be overran before they use nuclear weapons in their defense. That the war in Ukraine, to me, is not as likely to break out in nuclear war as an invasion of Israel is, because they have them and they intend to use them, and it is part of their self-defense. They will not be overran, and if they feel like they're going to destroy every Arab nation that borders them, I promise you. And I think that's on the table right now. I think that's a discussion right now. I think that the Israelis intend to subjugate and destroy Palestine and abandon all hopes at peace and choose conquering over peace. And when that happens, I believe the Arab nations are going to unite against them. We're going to have another massive war in the Middle East. And if cornered, nuclear bombs will be hurled on this battlefield. And it may spread to other nations and to other situations. Iran has them. I don't care what people say, Iran has them. They've had them for some time. That the proliferation of nuclear weapons on the global battlefield and in the global situation has made any conflict capable of producing a nuclear event. Man, I got some flies that are invading my house. It's because it's cold outside and warm in here. And they'll come out in the door, they just come running in. Having a little cold front down here in Oklahoma. Now, you need to learn basic survival skills, and you need to strengthen your spiritual skills. And I wouldn't put a lot of effort into laying up money and gold, but you do need to stop spending so you can lay up food and have basic preparations, because the economy is going to get worse, and you may end up eating up those preps long before war breaks out in America just because of economic pressure. But in my opinion, it's better to put money into food and long-term food preps right now than it is to put money in the bank, because that's the first thing they go after when the government needs money. They come after yours, right? And so this is a time where investing in yourself, in your knowledge, they can't take that away from you. Invest in your spiritual strength. They can't take that away from you. And you talk to anybody who survived imprisonment, survived prison camps, survived being a POW, survived nearly starvation settings, they'll all tell you that it was their mental preparation, their spiritual preparation, their mental and spiritual strength that saw them through when their physical strength was sapped by the events. Brothers and sisters, engage in prayer. Engage in fasting. Strengthen your faith. Learn to operate in supernatural ways. Get in touch with your supernatural skills and abilities, your prophetic giftings, your intuition, all of these things, your personal relationship with God, so that you're being led by God, so that no weapon formed against you can prosper, so that you can overcome in the evil day. Put on the full armor of God, the shield of faith, the breastplate of righteousness, the helmet of salvation. Prepare now with the knowledge of the gospel of peace. Gird your loins with the truth, and the truth will see you through. I do need your financial support, especially going into these difficult times. And I need you guys to help me so that I can continue to make these videos. I can continue to tell the hard truths. I can continue to spread the good news of the gospel and the power that is available to us through the Holy Spirit. I need your support. There's a link in the description to PayPal and to Cash App. You can send something to my P.O. Box. You'll find it there. And I'm going to leave you with this powerful prayer. May God surround us in his ring of fire and hedge of thorns of protection. May he send mighty angels of sufficient rank, authority, and number to drive the enemy from our midst. And then may he bless us with peace. May he strengthen us spiritually. May he give us the good gifts of supernatural power and abilities to see us through this time of need. May he impress upon the leaders of this country to always strive for peace, for Christ is the Prince of Peace, and peace is the goal. But in the times that are coming forward, may God strengthen all of us, empower all of us with grace and love and faith and power. In Jesus' name, amen. We'll see you next time on the Sheep Pen.